Hood Scholarship.
What if I told you in 2008, the Vatican sent a letter to the church directed by the quote-unquote Holy Father in accordance with the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, that sole focus is to erase the Holy Tetragrammaton Yahweh from the liturgy of the Christian Church. The letter is titled Letter to the Bishops' Conferences on the Name of God, dated June 29th, 2008, intended as stated in the introduction that
regards the translation and the pronunciation in a liturgical setting of the divine name signified in the sacred Tetragrammaton, along with a number of directives.
So basically, what this letter is an outline on the translation and pronunciation and how it's supposed to be written and said in church according to the church. In the last sentence of the first expose, the Congregation of the Doctrine and their Holy Father, the Pope, admit that they will not only set directives on the holy name of God, but also set out essential facts when it states,
"It is therefore our intention with the present letter to set out some essential facts which lie behind the above-mentioned norm and to establish some directives to be observed in this matter."
So let's take a look at some of these facts and directives on the name of God. So when speaking on the Holy Tetragrammaton, the letter, who again is directed by the Pope and the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith, reveals a startling fact when it states,
"As an expression of the infinite greatness and majesty of God, it was held to be unpronounceable and hence was replaced during the reading of sacred scripture by means of the use of an alternate name, Adonai, which means Lord."
So here, the congregation outlined a fact that was practiced by the translators of the oldest version of the Old Testament, known as the Septuagint, when it states in the next paragraph,
"The Greek translation of the Old Testament, the so-called Septuagint, dating back to the last centuries prior to the Christian era, had regularly rendered the Hebrew Tetragrammaton with the Greek word Krios, which means Lord."
Continuing in the tradition of erasing the Holy Tetragrammaton Yahweh from the text and replacing it with the term Lord wasn't just found in one translation, but the main three in which we get our English translations from, when the letter goes on to say,
"Since the text of the Septuagint constituted the Bible of the first generation of Greek-speaking Christians, in which language all the books of the New Testament were also written, these Christians too, from the beginning, never pronounced the divine Tetragrammaton."
When referring to the Latin Vulgate, the letter goes on to say,
"In these translations too, the Tetragrammaton was regularly replaced with the Latin word Dominus, corresponding both to the Hebrew Adonai and to the Greek Krios."
So in three of the foundational texts and languages that created our English translations, they are all said to have replaced the holy name of God with an alternate title or name. In all three languages, the term is translated as Lord. In the Hebrew, we have Adonai. In the Greek, it's Krios. And in the Latin, it's Dominus. In the third expose, the letter lies out another fact that could be shocking the most when it goes on to say,
"The sacred Tetragrammaton was never pronounced in the Christian context nor translated into any of the languages into which the Bible was translated."
So here, the Pope, in accordance with the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith, admits that since as far back as the oldest version of the Old Testament we have available, the Holy Tetragrammaton was never translated into the text, which is probably why when we look at Genesis 3:14 and these older texts, we come up with a lot of different translations. So now that the facts are laid out, the Holy Father, aka the Pope, and the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith lay out three directives that are to be observed based on the facts they presented. And the first directive states,
"In liturgical celebrations, in songs and prayers, the name of God in the form of the Tetragrammaton Yahweh is neither to be used or pronounced.
So in short, the holy name isn't supposed to be said nor pronounced, not even in prayers, although Exodus 3:15 tells you,
"This is my name forever, and this is my memorial to all generations."
However, if the Tetragrammaton was never pronounced or translated into any of the languages into which the Bible was translated, dating as far back as the Septuagint, then who are we ordered to pray to by the church? And who have we been praying to if the holy name has been hidden from translations since the beginning? In the second directive, it states, the divine Tetragrammaton is to be rendered by the equivalent of Adonai, Krios, Lord. Again, reiterating, Lord is equivalent to the holy name of God. And in the final directive, it further clarified their equivalency of God and Lord when it states,
Adonai is to be translated Lord, and the form God is to be used for the Tetragrammaton Yod-He, Wav-He, similar to what happens in the Greek translation of the Septuagint and in the Latin translation of the Vulgate.
So in essence, this is similar to the 6th century redaction of the text and pasting Yahweh over older Elohim stories, only now they're pasting God and Lord over Yahweh and Elohim stories. But don't worry, the Holy Father, the Pope, said it's okay, so it must be okay, right?
Hood scholarship. This is not your average podcast.